Over 5,000 years ago, a single man rose from the lands along the Nile and forever altered the course of history. His name was Narmer, and he may have been the very first pharaoh of Egypt. Around 3150 BCE, he emerged as the ruler who unified Upper and Lower Egypt, creating a kingdom that would endure for millennia and give rise to one of the world's greatest civilizations. But the story of Narmer is shrouded in mystery, legend, and intense scholarly debate. Was he truly the first king of Egypt, or should the honor go to Menes? Early Egyptologists often treated Narmer and Menes as two separate individuals. Narmer, the ambitious ruler who attempted unification at the end of the pre-dynastic period, and Menes, the king who supposedly succeeded in establishing the first dynasty. Over time, however, doubts about Menes's very existence began to mount. Archaeological evidence for Menes is extremely scarce, while Narmer is well documented across multiple inscriptions and artifacts. The great Egyptologist Flinders Petrie proposed that Narmer and Menes were actually the same individual, Narmer being his real name and Menes an honorific meaning he who endures. The confusion doesn't stop there. Narmer's successor, Hor-Aha, is also sometimes credited with unifying Egypt. Some scholars argue that if Hor-Aha truly achieved this, then Menes might have been his title, not Narmer's. Others maintain that Egypt wasn't fully united until much later, under kings like Khâsekhemoui, the last ruler of the Second Dynasty, or King Den, who is depicted wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt around 2990 BCE. Yet one artifact seems to cut through the debate: the Narmer Palette. Carved from siltstone more than 5,000 years ago, it shows Narmer wearing both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, a powerful symbol of unification. This extraordinary artifact remains one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the birth of Egypt as a nation. Pre-dynastic Egypt. Setting the stage, to understand Narmer, we need to look back at pre-dynastic Egypt, 6000 to 3150 BCE. During this time, Egypt was divided into regional kingdoms, each with its own culture, rulers, and economic systems. Upper Egypt, in the south, was wealthier and more urbanized, with cities like Hierakonpolis, Thinis, and Naqada emerging as early cultural and political centers. These cities developed complex social structures, craft production, and religious practices, particularly centered around local deities and early mortuary rituals. Lower Egypt, in the north, was largely rural but extremely fertile thanks to the Nile Delta. Agricultural production was abundant, supporting growing populations and trade networks. Over time, the wealth of Upper Egypt enabled these city-states to extend their influence northward, gradually absorbing neighboring territories. By the end of the pre-dynastic period, the stage was set for unification, and it was Narmer who would become the pivotal figure in this transformation. Narmer and the written record. According to Manetho, an Egyptian priest writing in the 3rd century BCE, Menes was the first king of Egypt. Menes allegedly hailed from Thinis in Upper Egypt, conquered neighboring cities, and then seized Lower Egypt. Manetho's records, along with the Turin king list, form much of what we know about Egypt's early kings, but these sources were written centuries after the events, and archaeological evidence to support Menes's reign is minimal. Modern scholars, therefore, often identify Narmer as the first king. Some argue that his unification of Egypt was peaceful, facilitated by diplomacy and strategic marriage alliances. Others contend that it involved military conquest, citing the depictions on the Narmer Palette and other ceremonial artifacts. Historian Marc van de Mieroop notes that Egyptian art of the period often symbolized kingship through battle scenes. The question remains, are these literal historical accounts or symbolic representations of power? Some scholars believe Menes may have never existed as a single historical figure. According to Douglas Brewer, Menes might represent a mythical amalgamation of multiple kings, each contributing to Egypt's unification. In this view, Menes is part truth, part fiction, a legendary figure embodying the very idea of unification. Whether through conquest or gradual economic absorption, Upper Egypt expanded into Lower Egypt over time, and Narmer, or Menes if you prefer, laid the foundations for the kingdom that would dominate the Nile for millennia. The Narmer Palette, a masterpiece of symbolism. Discovered in 1897-1898 at Hierakonpolis by British archaeologists Quibell and Green, the Narmer Palette is a ceremonial tablet over 2 feet tall, carved from a single piece of siltstone. It contains some of the earliest hieroglyphics ever found, making it both an artistic and historical treasure. The palette tells a story on 2 sides. Front side, Narmer wears the white crown of Upper Egypt and is depicted as a bull trampling enemies, breaking through city walls and asserting his dominance. Above him, bull heads possibly symbolize the goddess Hathor, or more broadly, the king's strength and vitality. Backside, Narmer is shown raising a war club, about to strike a defeated enemy. Beneath his feet lie other vanquished foes. A servant holds Narmer's sandals, while Horus, the falcon god, watches over the scene, blessing the victory and symbolizing divine approval. While long considered a literal record of conquest, modern scholars often view the palette as symbolic, a statement of authority and legitimacy rather than a literal chronicle of war. Regardless of interpretation, it demonstrates that Narmer was a ruler of immense power who claimed dominion over both Upper and Lower Egypt. Narmer's reign and legacy. Once Egypt was united, Narmer consolidated his rule. He married Neithhotep, a princess of Naqada, strengthening political ties between the major cities. Some evidence suggests Neithhotep may have ruled as regent after Narmer's death, one of the earliest examples of female authority in Egyptian history. Narmer introduced iconic Egyptian symbols such as the Ankh, life, and the Djed pillar, stability, which would feature prominently throughout Egyptian culture for thousands of years. He expanded Egypt's influence through military campaigns into Canaan and Nubia. Large-scale urbanization and building projects flourished under his reign, setting the stage for the monumental architecture of later dynasties. Despite the scarcity of detailed records, Narmer established the cultural, political, and religious blueprint that all future pharaohs would follow. His dynasty would dominate Egypt, creating a civilization that lasted for more than 3 millennia. Interpreting unification. The question of how Egypt was unified, peacefully, through conquest, or gradually over decades, continues to fascinate historians. Some argue the Narmer Palette depicts military action, while others see it as a ceremonial or symbolic affirmation of kingship. Regardless, the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt was likely a combination of economic absorption, political alliances, and military enforcement. It is also worth noting that art and inscriptions from the period were as much about ideology as history. They communicated the king's power, divine favor, and legitimacy, rather than providing a literal record. In this sense, Narmer's reign was not just about conquest. It was about creating a coherent identity for a unified Egypt. Conclusion. So, who truly united Egypt? Was it Narmer, Menes, Hor-Aha, or someone else entirely? The answer may remain unknown, but around 3150 BCE, a leader rose who forged the first Egyptian kingdom, creating a state that would endure for thousands of years. Whether historical fact or legendary narrative, Narmer stands at the dawn of recorded history. He was the man who wore both crowns, united 2 lands, and laid the foundation for one of humanity's greatest civilizations. His legacy would echo through the ages, shaping the Egypt we know from history, mythology, and the magnificent artifacts he left behind.